MTR Corporation agrees to an early review of its fare adjustment mechanism. The Rating and Valuation Department under fire from the Director of Audit. And Taiwanese officials in Beijing to discuss controversy over Kenya's deportation of fraud suspects.
Good evening. The MTR Corporation has agreed to the government's request to review its fare adjustment mechanism a year ahead of schedule. The railway giant says it will balance the views of all stakeholders in the review process. Evelina Long reports.
MTR fares have gone up for 7 straight years under the company's fare adjustment mechanism. The mechanism was due to be reviewed next year. However, the government recently asked for an early review. The MTR Corporation today agreed to the government's request, though it stressed the importance of a stable income for the company.
Our current fare levels in terms of fare paid per kilometer traveled as a proportion of wages is low when compared to metros in many cities in the world, whilst at the same time our service performance in terms of comfort and punctuality is much higher. In order to maintain our good service performance, it is essential to have stable and sustainable income to ensure that we have sufficient resources to invest in our rail network.
Leung added they will take all stakeholders' opinions into consideration, including those from members of the public and the company's shareholders. The government welcomed the railway company's announcement. In a statement, the administration says the review is to better respond to the public's concern about the MTR Corporation's profitability and passengers' affordability. This while respecting the financial prudence required of MTR as a listed company. Evelyn Lang, TVB News.
Excuse me, the latest audit report says the Rating and Valuation Department has failed to properly handle non-compliance cases. There have been cases of government rent not being paid. Rani Samtani has the details.
The Director of Audit found that as of the end of September last year, the total amount of outstanding rates and government rent was $172 million. That's 0.5% of the annual amount demanded. In one case, it found the defaulter had owed rates and government rent since 2007 for 16 properties. The defaulter continued to occupy the properties without paying, and the outstanding amount totaled $1 million. The department only referred all the properties to the Lands Department in December 2015 to take action. Meanwhile, to calculate rental values, the Rating and Valuation Department requires property owners and tenants to provide rental information. It issues forms to selected properties every August. But out of more than 300,000 forms sent out each year, about 18% of them were not returned. While the department has taken prosecution action in the past, the number of ratepayers failing to do so has increased in recent years. In addition, the department asked ratepayers to report whether their properties had been subdivided or combined. It issued more than 3,000 forms to ratepayers in 116 buildings where the Buildings Department identified 800 subdivided units. However, of the 2,000-plus forms returned, only 44 reported rental and subdivided unit information. The Director of Audit suggested the department seek assistance from the Buildings Department. The watchdog urged the Commissioner of Rating and Valuation to step up efforts to ensure people are filing accurate rental information. And when there are non-compliance cases, the department should take follow-up action, such as issuing advisory letters or making prosecutions. The Director of Audit also looked at more than 50,000 cases of unauthorized building works with removal orders issued between 2001 and 2015. It discovered that action had not been taken in 30% of the cases as of the end of last year. Rani Samtani, TVB News.
The audit report also called on the government to be more consistent when evaluating job-hopping foreign domestic helpers. It also thinks the income and asset threshold for hiring helpers is outdated because it hasn't changed for nearly 5 decades. Winner Wong tells us more.
There are currently over 300,000 foreign domestic helpers in Hong Kong, making up about 4% of the city's population. The audit report today dedicated a chapter to foreign domestic helper issues, among them the topic of so-called job hoppers. According to the report, that's when foreign domestic helpers deliberately underperform to make their employees terminate their 2-year contracts early. After that, they will head to Macau or the mainland for a short trip, while their entry visa for new employment is being approved. To fight this, the Immigration Department would identify helpers with 2 or more premature contract terminations within a year and call up their former employers for better assessment of the helpers' visa applications. The Audit Commission randomly extracted and looked into 30 such cases. It found that in 7 cases, the Immigration Department failed to contact any ex-employers who had made negative comments on their helpers' contract termination notice or complaint letters. The 7 applications ended up being approved anyway. The Director of Audit called for guidelines to be issued on the follow-up procedures to ensure consistency. There's also an issue of outdated policies. In order to hire a foreign domestic helper, the employer must have a household income of at least $15,000 per month or assets of no less than $350,000. However, the report today noted that this threshold hasn't changed since the 1970s. It noted that it's high time to take a look at all of the socio-economic changes over the past 5 decades, such as inflation, and review these requirements. In fact, an interdepartmental working group on review of policies found the income threshold unrealistically low back in 2001. But the Labor Department told the Audit Commission when questioned in March this year that there was no information showing that wage defaults for helpers had become a trend, and so there was no urgent need for review. It also said the minimum wage for helpers has increased 5 times over the past 6 years. Winna Wong, TVB News.
Next, fallout in Hong Kong over the Panama paper leaks. A number of officials and lawmakers were found to have failed to come clean on their financial dealings. As Adam Chu reports, that's prompted calls to review the current disclosure system.
3 local media have obtained leaked documents of the Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca. The documents reveal that New People's Party lawmaker Michael Tian had failed to declare to the Legislative Council the interests he holds in an offshore firm, which was jointly formed with his wife in 1997.
It's a dormant company. There was a company that hold a golf membership, and there have been absolutely no activity, zero, nothing. I have to apologize. I left out something that I should have declared, and so I should not have left out. There's no other excuse.
Former Chief Secretary for Administration Henry Tang is shown to have formed an offshore company with property developer Christopher Chang in 1997. 3 days before becoming the Commerce Minister in 2002, Tang transferred his share in the company to his father for a nominal $1. Tang has insisted he abided by the declaration rules, but said he mistakenly declared the company as Fairs Alliance instead of the correct Fair Alliance. The papers also show the family of Development Secretary Paul Chan owned 2 offshore firms. That's linked to an earlier controversy involving land in an area in northeast New Territories that the government was going to develop. Lawmakers say this is unacceptable and are demanding change.
It seems that he is very knowledgeable and have very good experience to create company in Panama or in Bahamas. To ensure that all those activities will be hidden and will not be known to the Hong Kong public, for years. I believe he have no option but to resign.
Each person may have a different interpretation of the requirements. Unless there is a court ruling on how to interpret the disclosure requirement, or if there is a clear guidance. So I think it's time to review the disclosure system and issue clearer guidelines.
Adam Xu, TVB News.
Taiwanese delegation arrived in Beijing today to discuss the controversy over the deportation of Taiwanese fraud suspects to the mainland. Taipei wants to ensure fair treatment for those deported from Kenya recently. The Taiwanese delegation of judicial and police officials will also try to set up a mechanism for cross-strait cooperation on future cases. Beijing claims jurisdiction in the Kenya case, saying the victims of the telecommunications fraud are mainland residents. but Taipei accuses Beijing of interfering in the legal affairs of Taiwanese people abroad. In a similar case, Malaysia deported a separate group of Taiwanese suspects to the island last week, despite Beijing's request that they be sent to the mainland. Taiwanese authorities, citing a lack of evidence, released the suspects after they landed on the island. And still to come in our news tonight. Ukraine reaches a deal with Russia for the release of a captured pilot. In Cuba, Fidel Castro makes a rare appearance at the Communist Party Congress. And a self-sanitizing toilet door handle invented by 2 secondary school students.
Water isn't a resource, it's a cycle that all creatures on Earth are part of.